Welcome to Hip Hop Movie Club, the show that harmonizes the rhythm of hip hop with the magic of movies. But today, we got a bonus episode. We're discussing the PBS documentary about the Central Park Five. We're three old heads who put their old heads together to vibe on these films for you. I'm Dino Wright, podcaster, filmmaker, longtime hip hop fan, and the institutional protectionism still be protectioning.
I'm JB, 80s and 90s nostalgia junkie, longtime hip hop fan. And the quote that stuck with me from this documentary is, "We're not very good people."
I'm Boogie, a DJ, longtime hip hop fan, and this story touched me so much while I was in middle school growing up. It was everywhere. I mean, because I live right outside of New York, so you couldn't go anywhere without hearing about this story.
In this episode, we'll answer the question, how has this travesty of justice impacted the five men? And please hit that subscribe button down below so you don't miss an episode.
The Central Park Five is a documentary of 5 Black and Latino teenagers from Harlem, New York, who were wrongly convicted of raping a white jogger in Central Park in 1989, as well as their eventual exoneration after serving lengthy prison terms. Directed by Ken Burns, Sarah Burns, and David McMahon. And Dr. Yusef Salaam, New York City Councilman and member of the Exonerated Five, will be the keynote speaker for Northampton Community College's annual Humanities program on April 15th.
We'll be there.
Yes, we
Shout
will.
out to Andrew McIntosh, DJ ARM18.
The man.
Yep. He's putting on these great programs, impactful programs for Northampton Community College in Bethlehem, PA.
Si, senor.
All right. So we're just doing this a little different. We're just going to go off the cuff and just talk about the Central Park Five. We mentioned travesty of justice. Boogie, you said it, this was everywhere and it still resonates today. Just blatant racial profiling and injustice.
Yeah.
Yeah, just insane. So these kids were just so young and there was an agenda, obviously. And I think that's what they mentioned here is that they wanted to make a statement that pinned this against some kids. And it was obviously much easier with what's going on in society, especially there in the late 80s when New York was so divided, crime running rampant, crack epidemic, which was, pointed at minorities. And there's all theories behind all that. But they're just pinning this crime on these kids and literally coercing them to make these statements. It is mind boggling.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that, like I mentioned before we started recording, is that this documentary, it brought back a lot of feelings at the time. It was borderline triggering. Growing up outside of New York, and I spent a lot of time, if I mentioned over various episodes, I spent a lot of time, I was born in Newark, born and raised in Newark, but I spent a lot of time in Jersey City, which geographically, for those of our listeners, is right across the water from New York City. So you can see New York City clear as day right across the water from Jersey City. So I spent a lot of time there as a youth with my family. So a lot of stories hit New York. It was hitting Jersey City and Newark right away because we pick up New York City stations. So yeah, they mentioned some things in here. Like they were laying out the background about what was going on at the time. And as JB said, there was a lot of racial tension going on, a lot of crime. A couple of names I did hear in the montage of them talking about how crime ridden and how racially tense the area was. They mentioned Bernard Goetz, the quote unquote subway vigilante who shot and injured 4 Black teenagers on a New York City subway in 1984. Don't want to get too much into it, but you can kind of guess what was going on at the time and why they were shot. Another clip mentioned Yusef Hawkins. Chubb Rock mentions Yusef Hawkins in his True Right song. Never forget Yusef Hawkins when you're walking. Yusef Hawkins was murdered in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn in 1989 when he, his brother, and some of their friends went to the predominantly Italian neighborhood to inquire about a used car that was for sale. There's a lot of theories about what happened and why they were targeted. I don't want to really get too much into that, but that shows the racial divide between different sections throughout Manhattan. People think, oh yeah, New York is not the South, but understand at that time, there's clear defining lines in neighborhoods where races were separated. And as we mentioned, we talked a little bit about this in Do the Right Thing with Bed-Stuy, and there's like different areas and how racial tensions developed throughout that. Same thing, that's kind of the background that was laid out for Do the Right Thing. And it's also laid out for this documentary as well. Unfortunately, as JB mentioned, these 5 young men were targeted, and they were basically railroaded through the system. They didn't really know what was going on. And like I said, it's kind of triggering because I'm looking at the whole situation, and it's always on the news. It's constantly on the newspapers, on the front page. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, man, these guys are not much older than me. I thought I was like 12 going on 13 at the time. And they're, 14, 15, and Corey was 16. It's like, wow, these guys are not much older than me. How could they do what was being said that they did? How could they do that? So it's like kind of hard to watch.
In the testimony that they were forced to write, there was graphic details in there. And I think one of the mentions, like, that's not how a 14, 15-year-old typically talks. Yeah. And they even, the crazy thing, it said 30 teenagers entered the park at the same time, right? And chaos had ensued. There was, on top of the rape that did occur, that these guys were not involved with, people were beating up like a homeless individual, and other people were being attacked, and it was just a chaotic scene. But, and people scampering, and they grab these kids, right? And what's the common is, like, they're minorities. You don't, how many of those kids, we don't even know how many of those kids look like me, right? So there's obviously such thing as like white privilege, and we speak about it, but like, how many of them were white, and that were they questioned? Were they coerced? Who knows? I don't know, like, the makeup, but there's a common denominator there is that Black or Latino kids that were taken into custody and forced to write and sign, and it was just ridiculous because the stories that they made up, everybody's pointing at each other. And because they were said, if you want to get out of here, and they were like literally interrogated for hours and upon hours. At that age, when you don't have that level of maturity, and you are granted an option to have an attorney, but you don't really think straight.
Right.
Give me more details or you're not going to get out of here. Right. And all this stuff and sign it. Obviously, the stories didn't corroborate. They were all different stories. They couldn't describe what the woman was wearing.
Right.
And so there was obviously gaps in the story, in the stories that were given. I think it was the journalist, Jim Dwyer. Yeah, I liked that journalist. He was telling it like it was.
Yeah.
Like, they actually had an alibi. Like, maybe they were involved with some of the other acts of mischief or violence or whatever, right? And they weren't there because they were making up things. Oh yeah, I saw from across the way, I saw this person do this, and they were literally, they knew the names of the other guys, so they just started saying names. This guy did this. This person held her down. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole situation was really crazy. Like you said, there was a whole group of kids, walking through the park at the same time. So they gave accounts when you see them mature, telling what happened, recalling what happened. They were saying they would describe what some of the stuff that they saw happen. And I think it was when they got around to Yusef Salaam, he's like, the only crime I committed that night was I jumped over a turnstile.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that, jumping over a turnstile would get you 6.5 years? It's insane.
Right. And what puts it even more into perspective is that the actual the guy that actually committed the crime, the criminal, was Matthias Reyes. The fact that they didn't capture him, he actually went on to commit more and more rapes while these guys were imprisoned. And there were other rapes that were happening of people within the same culture, and it didn't get obviously nearly as press. It was because this was a white woman, well-to-do. She was like either a Wall Street broker or some professional like that. So it got all these types of press, right? But there was more I don't like to talk about levels, but there was more egregious rapes and that were going on, but because they were like within the same culture, they weren't getting as much press. This became the lightning rod case. And then you have everybody chiming in, including the current president, taking out the full page ad and all that stuff and wanting to invoke death penalty and support capital punishment and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Which came up again in the most recent national conventions, and he refused to admit that he was wrong. So, yeah.
Par for the course.
Oh yeah.
Right. Exactly. Right.
Oh yeah. Right on brand.
So even when it came to trial, it was like the jurors were too tired to even go on any further. It was similar, like the boys wanted to just get out of the interrogation. It's like the jurors just wanted to leave, and they just came up with cockamamie stories. I think that was the actual adjective. Came up with a cockamamie story that pointed to their guilt because we were just so tired of the case.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I do understand on one side how you have these testimonies of admissions of guilt, but you could clearly see, as I said, that they were coerced and they didn't match up with each other.
Yeah.
And they were so young, and then they were, they didn't match up.
Yeah, it was really sad how they got those stories out of them. Kevin's mother was there. Mm-hmm. Kevin Richardson, his mother was there. She had a disability, and they just, you go on home and we'll take care of everything, and we'll get your son home to you. And then they look over to his sister. Oh, you're of age, so you can stick behind. And your mother was cooperating what we were doing, and we'll just make sure we'll take care of him, so we can get him out of here as quickly as possible and get him home. Raymond Santana's father, of course, he didn't, which is really sad, didn't have the luxury of being able to call out of work and just assume that his son would be okay because they said that they were going to release him. So he went to work, unfortunately. And then he comes back to see his son, and they're like, move him to another room. They moved him and everything. He couldn't even see his son. It's like, that's crazy. And they were denying him food. They're denying him water. We mentioned you've been there for hours upon hours, and they're like, just tell us what we want to hear so you can go home. And Antron, for his father's there with him, feeding his father the story of, he told his father, I didn't do it. He's like, I don't lie to my father. I told him I didn't do it. And then they said, well, if he just cooperates with us, we'll get him out of here. So of course his father's like, well, just come on, let's just hurry up so we can get out of here. Tell them what they want to hear. And the guys are all in separate rooms, and they're like, well, you got to tell us what happened because he's pointing the finger at you. And then they told him, well, if he's pointing the finger at me, well, I'm going to point the finger back at him. And then everybody's pointing the finger at one another, and the stories are not adding up. As you mentioned, they couldn't even describe what she was wearing. Simple details like that. And then when they get to the trial, I mean, there's no DNA evidence.
That was a big one too. Yeah, evidence.
No DNA evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's DNA there.
There's
it doesn't
DNA
match,
there, but
it wasn't theirs.
It doesn't match any of the quote unquote perpetrators. There's no matches for them. It's insane. All kinds of loopholes, and they just kept full steam ahead. Let's railroad this through, and because they already put them out as the suspects, and now they can't back down now because they don't want to ruin their careers and their images.
Justice at any cost.
Justice at any cost. Yep. Sad.
In the intro, Dinah Wright, you mentioned institutional protectionism. So even after they're exonerated, you see multiple articles in these tabloid papers and other papers like, oh, they were exonerated, but maybe they shouldn't have been. And then the police were trying to protect their name, and they never admitted any wrongdoing. Yeah, we did. Meanwhile, these kids lost valuable years of their lives being stuck in jail. Corey was in Rikers. I know Corey was in Rikers Island, which is literally the most notoriously nasty prison out there. Others were, actually maximum security prisons. And even when Raymond Santana came back, and he's like, I totally was a different person. Like, I just couldn't look anybody in the eye because I'm always just checking my whereabouts. And I feel like, I'm just like, all jittery.
No, they were all traumatized.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a form of PTSD, literally. And the impact is then you have this dark mark on your record that you can't get a job easily. So these guys are struggling to get a job. There was one of the guys was about to get a job in the Postal Service, and then it came up that he had a prison sentence. So then he lost that opportunity.
Yeah.
And then you're also registered as a sex offender also. So how are you supposed to get a job now? And you were wrongly accused, but you still have those on your record. So I don't know at what point it became expunged from the record, but I mean, these guys went through hell.
Yeah. And Raymond Santana is trying to figure out how to make money because he's like, I had an appetite, I'm eating, I'm staying in the house, and I'm not contributing. So, he goes out and he starts hustling, starts selling drugs. And I mean, of course he got picked up because luck would have it. But because he already had a record, now he's a second offender. Like, so now he's got to serve more time. So he gets locked up and he's in jail. Poor Antron just left the whole area. He's like, I'm gone. He went to Maryland. He said, I can't even be around here anymore. He just moved. Luckily, he was able to find a job down there. Probably because he was out of the spotlight. He was out of the area. I mean, I'm pretty sure they heard of the case down there, but they didn't put two and two together because he was so far removed. Had he tried somewhere closer to home, he probably would have got the same struggles that everyone else did. But because he moved to Maryland, he was able to pick himself up and start working. And he's been, working constantly ever since and was able to start a family and such. But the other guys, they're still going through the ringer a little bit. I've seen interviews with Corey Wise, and you can clearly see when he starts talking about what he went through, you can clearly see the trauma in him and how he was affected because, it's a known fact that, rapists, they get a hard time in prison. It's a known fact. And even though he didn't do it, he's labeled as it. That's what he's there for.
Yeah.
So we know he had a hard time. He probably had the roughest time. I mean, I watched a dramatization of what he went through, but he was in solitary confinement and all kinds of things. Man, he had it really, really, really bad. And I feel sorry. Like, you mentioned, these are supposed to be some of the best years. You're a teenager. Raymond Santana mentioned, we watched a lot of Yo MTV Raps. We listened to this, we did that. I was coming into my own. Then it stopped. Figuring out who you are as a person, what kind of man you're going to be.
Yeah.
And then it's taken away from you. You're not even given a choice. You become a survivor. That's the mentality you have. And like your normal routine is completely thrown off. Things that you normally do and take for granted, you can't do those any longer. You have a whole different routine in how you handle things, deal with people.
Missing out on proms, graduation, starting your career, like you said, in the formidable financial years. So you're building up a career usually, and you can never get that back. And then you have, again, the checkered past, unfortunately. And Corey Wise, his father passed away while he was in jail too. So the toll that it takes on your family on top of that, he said it was like cirrhosis of liver. So I guess his father had a drinking problem, but maybe it became worse because his son's in jail. Who knows?
Couldn't have helped.
So, couldn't have helped. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think he mentioned that his father was coping, drinking the cope. Yeah.
Right. So, just terrible. Just terrible. And, the quote, and I forget the name of the young man who was also just excellent, who said, we're not very good people. I don't know if he was a lawyer or journalist.
No, that was the historian. That
historian.
Was Craig Stephen Wilder.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's a terrible story.
But not the whole story, though.
Oh, no, not the whole story.
Right.
Yeah, I remember like there was one of the quotes that stuck out for me was Reverend Calvin Butts. He was actually the they didn't state who he was, but I'm very familiar with him. I've actually met him on a couple of occasions. He was the pastor of Abyssinian Baptist Church, a historic African American church in New York. For about I think he was involved in that church for about 50 years until he passed away. He said the most endangered species in America was the young black man, and I was just like, yeah,
He ain't wrong.
nah. I remember too, poor Raymond's father, Raymond Sr., because he felt the guilt because he was the one that told Raymond to go to the park. He said, the corners, there's nothing good on the corner. Why don't you go hang out in the park?
Yeah.
It's like, man. Yeah.
But to show what kind of character some of these guys have, like Yusef, Salaam, and I think it was Kevin Richardson, they end up they get a college degree because at that point, the prisons were affording the inmates the opportunity to get a college degree. So they better themselves, which goes to show you the kind of character these guys had. If they were like hardened criminals that, had wrong intentions, they probably wouldn't have done that.
I think Raymond Santana got his as well. And I know Antron said he started it, but they discontinued the program while he was in the middle of it, so he never finished.
Right.
Yeah.
What are the odds that Matthias Reyes would then, intersect in prison with Corey Wise, and he had admitted it? Because you wouldn't think that someone that had committed multiple heinous crimes like Reyes did would have that kind of wherewithal or the change of heart to have the empathy for Corey Wise, because Corey was talking, he's like, Matthias Reyes was saying, he's serving time for something that I committed.
Mm-hmm.
And the actual documentary was well done in terms, it started off with a confession statement, and then you're like, wait a second, who's this? And it comes back to that at the end. I mean, that was fortuitous because that led to the exoneration. I mean, unfortunately, it was many, many years too late, but at least they did find the guilty party.
Yeah. And what's crazy is that Matthias Reyes and Corey Wise actually came across one another in Rikers, and they actually had an altercation. So that was their second time coming across one another, and he recognized them, and he went over and apologized to him. He's like, "Man, it's all right, whatever, man." and he's just like you said, he went and confessed, and I think and not only think that he confessed, I think he kept pressing them about it until they actually listened. Because they were probably I think they brushed him off a couple of times. And I think he actually persisted on confessing before they finally actually looked into it and found out that his DNA was in fact at the scene of the rape. It's like, wow. It's crazy. Corey served 16 at the time.
Yeah.
And others were charged as youth, but they still served 6.5 years. Mm-hmm. That's still a long time.
Especially that age.
Yeah. Yep. When the news and everything first broke, Raymond was he was serving time for the drug charge.
Yeah.
Which, luckily for him, got bumped down because now his previous record was wiped. So now he's a first-time offender.
Yeah.
Right.
Luckily for him,
Well, so these guys have evolved, and now several of them are speaking out against injustice, which is good to see, that they're able to kind of make a bit of a career out of public appearances, talking about their experience in fighting against injustices such as this.
Yeah, both Corey and Kevin now do work for the Innocence Project.
Yes.
You haven't heard of that? Work on similar cases of people wrongly accused of crimes.
And I know Raymond has also donated some of his funds because he has a clothing brand. Which
Yeah.
reminds me, I actually got to go back and revisit his site, see what he has up. He donates the proceeds from his clothing brand to the Innocence Project as well. And I know Corey donated a large donation to the
It's still up.
chapter
Yep.
in I believe the chapter's in Colorado. It might be Denver, but I know it's in Colorado. And they ended up naming the chapter after him.
You can still get his stuff.
Park Madison. I remember when he first dropped that clothing line a few years ago, and I was like, oh man, I got to get something. And something came up and I never got it because I wanted one of the shirts with their names on it. And there was another shirt that they had, I believe it had like a cherub on it. I was like, I want to get some of that. Get some Park Madison swag. Yusef Salaam is now a member of the New York City Council representing District 9. And was elected in November 7th, 2023. And also, Raymond Santana has announced his candidacy for New York City's 8th District.
Okay.
Which represents East Harlem and the Bronx. So they'll be neighboring, if elected, there'll be neighboring councilmen for neighboring districts. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Right. And I know the documentary left off with the civil suit that they filed, but it actually did get resolved.
So this movie comes out in 2012. They file civil suits in 2013, and the settlement comes out the year after that.
Yeah.
Which has been reported as $41 million.
Yes.
And then they got additional money after that.
From the state.
From the state.
Mm-hmm.
Almost $4 million from that too. So
yes. Yep.
Like I said, this documentary is only some of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But Ken Burns said that he was hoping that if this film would help spur the city to settle, and they got the result.
Looks like it did. Yeah, it did. Looks like it did.
And his daughter also directed this film. She's written books about the Central Park Five, so other ways to tell a story.
Right. Yeah. I was so glad to hear that the evidence came out that they didn't do it, because I remember, like I said, it was so triggering. And like there was one thing that I clearly remember where they kept the wilding, the wolf pack roaming through I was like, what the heck? Like, really? It's like these guys are like my age. Like I'm not a pack of wolves. Like what?
Yeah,
it's so hard to like keep seeing that over and that word thrown around over and those that narrative repetitive, just over and over and over again. It's like, man, our current person in office, with the full page ad, and then you see all of the other people talking about it. Ed Koch and this person and that person, and all the people on the street are just basically throwing a book at them, and then they, in the court of public opinion, they were guilty before the trial even started.
Definitely.
But
yes, it's cautionary tale. Know all the facts before you make that decision.
Yeah,
I'm wondering, like case like this. I mean, there's travesties of justice all the time, Travis, and in this day and age, that the technology to capture DNA evidence has evolved, has improved.
Yeah.
A lot of people have a camera in their pockets in the form of a cell phone, so there's more surveillance.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like, if this would have happened in the past year, how would it be different?
Well,
that's interesting.
There's still institutional racism.
Well, yes, definitely institutional racism, but this specific case, I would hope that there would be. I hope that there would be someone that may have captured some in Central Park.
Yeah, Central Park's cameras everywhere.
The Central Park, there's tons and dozens of people, and there's that many people. When you have 30 teenagers going into there, at this point, a lot of people will be recording something or like, hey, unfortunately, people like to film when people get beat up or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just say these guys were maybe involved with harassing someone or something like that. Like, well, at this time, this is what we were doing. We were pushing around this guy. We were not raping this woman.
The alibis are a little stronger.
Exactly. That's my point.
With
it's like
more digital timestamps.
Timestamps, exactly.
Exactly.
And that was the big issue because they were trying to map it out. And they were like, well, they're saying that it happened over here, but like clearly, like if you look at it, there's no way they could have been over here when they were over here with these guys. And it's like, what? But yeah, digital timestamps and cameras everywhere and technology. It's impossible for them to be way over here when they're right here. And like, I mean, we can clearly see it. The technology would support that.
Even like GPS stuff. I mean,
yeah.
The young woman that was raped, she was using a Walkman. Now she'd probably be using her phone, listening to music through AirPods or whatever. And maybe she has Find My iPhone or some sort of technology where it's like, okay, she was literally right here. These boys were right here.
Yeah.
Could be. Case closed. So
defense lawyers have more to work with.
Yeah.
A lot more to work with these days. Yeah. This was 1989. So well before cell phones.
Not really running with the cellular phone.
It would be like a cinder block stuff.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, this story was also made into a 4-part limited series for Netflix in 2019 that was co-written and directed by Ava DuVernay called When They See Us. I highly recommend people to watch it, but I also caution them that it's a very hard watch if you choose to watch it. Like
even this documentary was intense.
Yeah.
2 hours of this was pretty intense.
Yeah,
watch a 4-part series. I don't know, man.
Yeah, that series, man, it had me in tears. Like literally, I'm bawling out. But yeah, it was. I think it was relevant because I think a lot of people don't realize how easy it is for something like this to occur. You know, you look at it and you're like, how could that happen when all of the evidence it happened? You know, we look at with all the time. People always say, how could this happen?
We let it happen.
Yeah, people have
that's how it happens.
They have a clear agenda and they're focused on pushing something through. Like, they had Mateus in custody while the trial was going on, and his DNA is in that file, but you choose not to look at it. Like, he's a serial rapist. Like, why would you not even consider looking at it? Just off the fact that he's a serial rapist. Like, maybe there's a hunch that he could have done it. We don't think he did. We think these kids did it. But on a hunch, let's just look over here just to check and make sure. Nobody even looked.
Yeah.
Or if they looked, they kept their mouth closed about it.
No, the whole culture of them getting coerced confessions, like, just automatically doesn't be conducive to, let's actually get the facts here.
Right.
Let's make the facts line up. No. You hold up your hand to a locomotive.
Exactly. But I look forward to seeing what Dr. Salaam has to say. I've always wanted to hear him speak. I've seen him on interviews and different things of such, and he's a very well-spoken person. I think the one thing that I got from learning about him, his faith is what got him through. Prayed a lot. He read a lot. Prayed a lot, read a lot, and that's what sustained him, even though it was hard, but that's what helped sustain him. But I hope he probably talks a little bit about that when we get to see him speak.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah.
It comes out like, crowd goes wild.
Because I know that every now and then when one of them will make an appearance, sometimes they'll bring one or two of the other ones with them. So I'm hoping.
You get a little bonus.
Yeah. I mean, they might not actually speak, but just to be there as a support.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Hip Hop Movie Club is produced by your HHMCs, JB, Boogie, and Dino Wright. Theme music by Boogie. Join us on April 24th at the Frank Banko Alehouse Cinemas at SteelStacks in Bethlehem, PA for a screening of Hustle and Flow in 4K, starring Terrence Howard, Maine, and Ludacris. Maine? Tickets at steelstacks.org.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
Maine?
Man, I was not expecting that. I couldn't even hold it. Oh man. Oh, thank God for the levity after a heavy topic.
I know.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching the Hip Hop Movie Club show. Ring the bell so you get notified when we post new content. It's the sound of a power up for us, so thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, we have more where that came from. Hit the thumbnail that's about to come on the screen.
And remember, don't hate, exonerate. If not
Exonerate.
guilty. Of course. If not guilty, exonerate.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
There you go.
Justice.
Yep, justice. Clear your mind, your conscience, and your record. Get it done.
Bring it. Come on.